Hi, I'm Zonal Fair and I like to review older PC parts to see how they stack up in modern games. Today I'm going to be reviewing the AMD Ryzen 5 2600X. Released around April 2018, the 2600X would have been regarded as a mid-range part on its initial launch. Featuring 6 cores and 12 threads, this will have been ideal for gamers looking for an inexpensive new processor. The 2600X isn't to be confused with the almost identically named 2600. The 2600X features slightly higher base and boost speeds over the 2600, but also uses more power as a result. Base speed on the 2600X is 3.6 GHz, but it will boost up to 4.25 GHz when needed. I paid around £38 for this processor from a second-hand retail store, which, in all honesty, was a little bit of a markup compared to what you could buy it for online. But you can pick these things up for around 30 quid. I had initially purchased this for testing purposes, coupled with a relatively inexpensive ASRock B450 motherboard that I bought specifically for testing purposes. Needless to say that things didn't work out that way. I had initially set up the CPU on the bench to test, but when it started outperforming an older Intel processor I was using to actually record the testing, I decided that I would simply swap out the old Intel and use the 2600X instead of it being an almost single-use purchase. I've been using this processor for the last few months, and in fact almost every video that features on my channel has had something to do with the 2600X since then, through either editing, capturing footage, or uploading my latest video to you for your enjoyment. Today I'll be running through some games with this processor, paired with 16GB of AMD branded DDR4 RAM, CPU-Z says that it's GEAL RAM, running at 2400MHz. I'll be honest, it's a little slower than I would like to use, but it's what I had lying around at the time I put this PC together. Officially, the 2600X does support up to 2933MHz DDR4, but 2933 is both not that easy to come by and generally tends to be outrageously expensive. For the GPU, I'll be using a GeForce GTX 1660 Super. Released in late 2019, this feels like a good pairing to the 2600X, and from my extended playtime with this machine, I'd say a fair choice for the 2600X. Powered by one 8-pin connector, the 1660 Super offers fantastic performance for its power envelope. One thing to note here outside of the normal, I normally use external capture equipment for game recording, but on this occasion, as this is the PC I actually used to record this footage externally, I had to use GeForce Experience for the video capture. In fairness, GeForce Experience seems very lightweight in my experience. I'm running through these games after video capture, produce results within a few frames of what you see here, which is more akin to a margin of error of those kind of numbers. Anyway, enough about the hardware, let's start getting onto the games. Grand Theft Auto 5 is first up. At 1080p, very high settings with the sliders set to maximum, this was a great experience. You'll notice that the frame rate does vary considerably with an unlocked frame rate, but I use a G-Sync monitor and these frame rate changes are actually completely imperceptible to me. If an unlocked frame rate does cause you any issues, lock it to 60 FPS and you'll have an absolutely solid time at 1080p. There were 1 or 2 dips below the 60 FPS mark, possibly due to data loading in from the 2TB 7200 RPM mechanical drive GTA 5 was installed on, but overall this wasn't an issue. GTA 5 ran great. The Dead Space remake makes its first appearance in the test lineup here. At 1080p with dynamic resolution and auto settings, Dead Space ran at 60 FPS most of the time. There was some slight stuttering issues, a complaint made a fair bit about the PC version of Dead Space, but nothing show-stopping. Dead Space was also installed to a fast NVMe drive for this testing, so unlike GTA 5 we can definitively say that access speed for data isn't an issue here. Overall though, Dead Space was a solid performer on this hardware. I returned to the Wild West in Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1080p high settings using the Vulkan API. Red Dead was absolutely fine at a fairly steady 50 to 60 FPS. If a 60 FPS target is what you want to aim for, turning down a few of the settings by a notch or two should get you to that 60 FPS. Although once again, as I'm using a G-Sync monitor, this small frame rate variation wasn't really noticeable for me. Red Dead has featured before on my channel using this hardware, so go take a look at that extended play video if you'd like to see Red Dead on this hardware more. And now we drop in with Helldivers 2 at 1080p using the balanced rendering mode and medium high settings. Helldivers 2 performed well enough, although this was the first game that seemed to have had some stuttering issues for me. I wasn't happy with the overall performance here, so after reviewing the footage during editing and checking the PC, I had, in error, put this on a mechanical drive, and I suspect that this could have been the cause here. As well as an NVMe drive, I also use a fast, well for a mechanical drive anyway, 2TB Toshiba drive for older games, but missed this game in my preparations. It's perfectly playable, but in the interest of fairness, I'm going to retest this in the very near future on an NVMe drive. The Division 2 ran very well. At 1080p high settings, the 2600X and 1660 Super kept the game at about the 60 FPS mark, but there was an occasional drop in frame rate which is unexplained by CPU or GPU usage. Again, as a G-Sync monitor user, I didn't have an issue with this, but the occasional drop-in is in no way a game changer, even without G-Sync. I play The Division 2 a lot on this PC, and this game even has its moments on a 5700X 3D and 2080 Ti, so I'm honestly not convinced that the occasional drop here is the fault of the hardware. Regardless, it was an absolutely fine experience overall, and it was a joy to play for the hour or so that I played The Division 2 on this, yesterday. Fallout 4 Next Gen is next. At 1080p high settings, Fallout 4 is a solid experience on this hardware, with a frame rate that deviates very little on this combination. Entering a new area dropped a couple of frames on very rare occasions, but this was immediately corrected, and the frame rate once again returned to 60 FPS. I played Fallout 4 a fair bit on this machine, around 20 hours overall, with no real complaints at all. You can have a really good time with this combination of hardware on Fallout 4. Battlefield 5 makes its first testing appearance. At 1080p, DX12 and high settings, Battlefield 5 was a flawless experience, with the only issue being that I couldn't get the metrics overlay to work no matter what I did here. The 2600X and 1660 Super delivered an absolutely outstanding result here though. Perfect. This is very, very playable on this hardware. The zombie-filled world of Dying Light 2 ran very well. At 1080p medium settings, Dying Light 2 delivered a decent experience. This is the first game tested today that appears to be GPU bound here, with occasional dips as the 1660 Super maxes out at 100% usage. This isn't a result of the processor, and I would suggest lowering maybe one or two of the game settings for that little bit extra on your path to 60 FPS. Even with these very occasional dips, it still ran great, and Dying Light 2 is another game I've played a lot on this PC. I've got around 20 hours on it so far, and it's been absolutely fine. I'm going to move on to Left 4 Dead 2. At 1080p with maximum, everything, Left 4 Dead has absolutely no issues reaching a solid 144 FPS on this hardware. It was a flawless experience. To be fair, it is an old game, but running these games at these frame rates requires some serious chops, so I wouldn't hold that against 2600X, with Left 4 Dead 2 being an older title. It was a solid job. It ran flawlessly, there was no dips at all. This is a great experience. Finally, The Witcher 3. At 1080p in DX12 mode and the medium preset, The Witcher ran fine, but like Dying Light 2, ended up GPU bound and had the occasional dips in performance, especially around busy areas once again. The 1660 Super is an incredible card, and for the price you can pick these up for, around £90 or so, it's hard to hold these minor drops against it. It's absolutely more than playable, and the very slight drops here and there aren't going to bother the vast majority of people. It's overall a great experience, though you've got to anticipate some dips in frame rate when you're entering the more busy areas of The Witcher 3. And that's a wrap for the games tested today. Overall, a great experience all round, with a couple of issues here and there that aren't really going to ruin your enjoyment for the game. I will retest Helldivers 2 in the very near future, as I made a mistake with the NVMe drive and it being placed on a mechanical drive, but that'll appear on my channel over probably the next week. The 2600X doesn't skip a beat outside of gaming either. It's a responsive, capable processor that will handle any task you throw at it. Of course, there are newer and better CPUs, but you'd be really hard pressed to find this kind of performance at this price point. The 2600X is old, but by all means, it doesn't mean it's incapable. Cinebench 2024 scores were 422 for multi-core, and single-core testing saw 62, which is okay. So, should you buy a 2600X? In today's second-hand market, the 2600X is easy to recommend at £30 or even less, coupled with a cheap AM4 motherboard, 16GB of whatever DDR4 you can get on, and a 1660 Super. You can build a PC that delivers a great experience for around £200 all in. You will want an aftermarket cooler for the 2600X. It is a little hungrier and warmer than its regular 2600 sibling, but I wouldn't pay too much unless you're thinking of bumping those clocks well up. It's not the world's fastest CPU, not by a long shot. It's not the best CPU ever made either, but it's not trying to be. But do you know what it is? It's cheap, cheerful, and even in 2024, it still has some chops about it. It cost me £38 and I absolutely love this thing. If you're on a tight budget, I think you'll love it too. As a side note, I generally dislike self-promotion, but if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. These videos take a lot of time and effort to make, and your input makes my work worthwhile. This has been the Ryzen 5 2600X. I've been Zonofear, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.